everybody, I'm chilling in my basement because I was applying to some jobs down here and I thought I would go ahead and do my July reading wrap up. I had a really good July. I read so many books. I read like over 20, and I also rated everything really highly. Like everything, I don't think I read any books that were like 2 stars. I only DNF'd one book, so I feel like most of my ratings were like 3s and above, which is like really solid. So I'm really excited to talk about those books with you today. We also do still have a week left in the month, so I will definitely be reading more books. So if you want to see my full wrap up with all of my reviews in depth, make sure you go to my Instagram because I post those at the end of every month and it includes all of the books that I've read. So make sure you go check that out. Without further ado, let's get into the books. I've got to go pretty quick with these because there's a lot that I'm trying to fit in this video. So we are going to start off with Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. A very hyped book. Everyone was reading it and I was like, I'm gonna pick it up. I was a little bit wary because sometimes really popular books don't hit for me, but this 100% did. I gave this 5 stars. I know it was a 5-star because I would be sitting at my internship and I'd be like, I can't wait to go home and read more of Yesteryear. It reminded me a lot of Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which is one of those ones where like you hate the narrator so much, but you can't bring yourself to look away. That's how I felt. Like I was like, I just have to keep reading this dumpster fire and this mess. I thought it was very fast-paced, very well written, and really strong messaging. Then I listened to the audiobook Anywhere With You. I gave this a 3.5 stars. The female main character took a while to grow on me. At first, I was like, I don't love her actions towards her sister and just like her attitude and behavior towards everything. So that was really hard for me to like get through. But then a little bit after the halfway point, she started to grow on me a little bit. And I was like, okay, like I kind of like her now. And I liked the romance and I liked our male love interest. I thought he was a really good character. So this was a solid like 3.5. Like I enjoyed it. I had a good time. It just wasn't like one of those ones that I'm like obsessed with. But overall, decent read. Then I picked up a NetGalley book on my Kobo called Meet Cute by Sam Parks. This was so cute, you guys. I loved this. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I have not read a Grumpy Sunshine trope in so long, and I feel like this one was peak Grumpy Sunshine trope, and I loved it. I also don't find myself reaching for many sapphic romance books, and I need to do that more because every sapphic romance book that I've read, I've really enjoyed. This one was no exception. I loved like the D&D Ren Fair kind of aesthetic that they had going on. I loved the side characters. The side characters were super well developed, and that's one of my favorite things to see in romance books. I just really enjoyed that, and there was just so much yearning from both ends, which I just loved to see all of that yearning. It was very slow burn, which we all know I love slow burn. So this was a super fun read. Then I picked up my classic read of the month, which is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I got this from the library. I really like Charles Dickens a lot. I've read 2 of his books before I read Great Expectations, and both of them are 4 stars and above. Great Expectations, I gave 4 stars. I was pretty invested throughout. There was a couple moments where I got bored, but I was really rooting for Pip. I love how the ending didn't wrap up cleanly with a bow. I thought that that was so interesting. And I love just like the commentary on class and classism. I just thought that that was really interesting. So this is definitely up there for classics for me. I feel like I've struggled this year. I've really hated some classics, but I've also really enjoyed some. This would definitely fall into the I really enjoyed this category. Okay, then also from the library, I picked up Sad Cypress by Agatha Christie. I gave this a 4.25. I love Agatha Christie's when she kind of like goes off script from like the typical mystery and kind of makes it a little bit more unique, and I definitely felt that way with this one. I did guess the twist, but it was more in like a satisfied way. Like I'm so happy that what I was thinking was confirmed. So I gave this a 4.25. I thought it was really cool, very uniquely written and well done. Then on my Kobo again, I picked up The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This was a 5-star read for me. I was so invested. It had everything I love in romantasy. You know, it had kind of a slow burn romance that didn't really show up until the end. It had such good found family. The found family was probably my favorite part of the book. these really interesting powers. We had trials, we had sort of rebellion and like political, I don't know what the word is, like political disarray, I guess. And those are just all the things that I love in fantasy books. So obviously this one resonated really well with me. I need to read the next book in the series because the cliffhanger that this ended on, I literally almost threw my Kobo across the room. I literally was like, what? You could not just end the book like that. So I really enjoyed this and had such a blast reading it. Okay, now we're getting to the book I DNF'd. I started the audiobook of And Then There Was You by Sophie Cousins, and I DNF'd at about 20%. Now, I don't want to judge the book as a whole because I didn't finish it, but based on the direction it was going, it didn't seem like something I was interested in. The first thing that tipped me off was the dedication of this book was written by ChatGPT. And, it says that. It literally says that it's quoted from ChatGPT. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a book about like how you shouldn't be using AI to write books. So I was like, okay, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And then we start getting into the story, which basically you learn that our FMC goes to a matchmaking service and they match her up with someone who is a robot. And I was a little bit like, I don't love that. And even the main character is like, I don't like that. I'm not interested. But then she ends up going back to it. And so I was like, is this supposed to be about AI? Like, is that what this is? And I was like, I don't really want to read a book about that. And also, I don't love the robot or like manufactured boy trope because as a romance reader, I am a hopeless romantic, and I feel like manufacturing the love interest takes the romance out of it because it's telling women and young girls the perfect man doesn't exist. You have to make him in a factory in order to get what you want from a man. And I feel like that's just so anti-romantic. Like, yes, it is true that fictional men are pretty high bar, high standards, but there are still great men out there in the world, And I believe that romance books help me believe that I will find that perfect man someday. And so reading a book where she couldn't find the perfect man, she had to make him, just really doesn't send the right message. Now, I'm not saying that the whole book gives that message because I only got about 20% in. So maybe it does flip the script a little bit and she finds, a real man. But just those two things really just kind of put me off the book. And also, I'd read Sophie Cousins in the past and didn't love the book that I read by her. So I was like, okay, I think I'm just gonna stop this here and not proceed further. But again, I could be completely wrong and the book could be very, pro-romance and against AI. But those two things, I was like, not a fan. Then I picked up Curtain by Agatha Christie, and I gave this a 3 stars. This is the last Poirot book in her, Poirot series. I thought it was a decent wrap-up. I loved the mystery element. I just didn't love the pacing. The mystery story was so fascinating to me. It just moved incredibly slow, which is kind of why we got a 3. And I do know that, Poirot is supposed to be, old and frail in this one, but I definitely missed, his funny, witty moments. And I know that those probably weren't present because he was so old and frail, but I feel like that's sort of the appeal of the Poirot books to me is I love Poirot as a character, and I feel like in this one he just wasn't as present. But again, that could have just been because he was old. So I landed on a 3 for that. Okay, I did a lot of Kobo reads this month. And then I read My Friends by Frederick Bachman. Frederick Bachman is becoming one of my favorite authors. I've talked about him a lot in this past year. So I am not a character-driven girly. I prefer plot in books, but Frederick Bachman alone has made me enjoy character-driven books. I don't know why, but his books specifically really speak to me, even though a lot of them just kind of follow one character and don't have too much of a plot. My Friends, I feel like definitely didn't have as large of a plot. It was definitely more of a coming-of-age, finding yourself kind of book. But this is a love letter to artists and creatives. The way that art was spoken about in this book was beautiful. I highlighted so many lines and I was just so moved by this book. It was beautiful in every way. I just want to recommend it to literally everyone. So obviously this was a 5 stars. Then I picked up the audiobook 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, and I have a lot of thoughts about this and I'm going to try to summarize them because otherwise I could make a whole video about this. I really loved our two characters' individual stories. Like, I loved kind of like the single mom navigating a disability, you know, trying to make it in the writing world. And I loved this like writer slash teacher character who really was very like paternal towards his students and, you know, is struggling with addiction and is trying to get out of that. Like, I loved those two on their own. And I feel like this read very much like a lit fic. I didn't like the romance aspect. I didn't like these two characters together. I'm not the biggest fan of second chance romance to begin with. And I feel like in this one, they were together for a week. And the week that they spent together was so problematic. You know, they were doing drugs, having alcohol. It was just like, and they were high schoolers. They were fighting a lot and like taking things personally. And I just felt like it was a little bit unrealistic to have like that 1 week together and then 15 years later somehow still be in love. Like, it didn't hit me the right way. Like, I couldn't care about the romance at all, which is why this was a 3. Like, I don't think that this should have been a romance book. I think it should have been a lit fic book because I loved both the characters. I also really loved the commentary on like racism within the writing world and the media world. Like, we saw a little bit of that and I wanted to see more of that and explore more of that storyline. Yeah, I think this would have been better as just a regular lit fic book. I did not care for the romance at all. Okay, then I picked up Jade City by Fonda Lee and I gave this a 3.5 stars. It definitely was like not at all what I was expecting. I don't know why I wasn't expecting an urban fantasy when the cover is literally giving urban fantasy, but I was not expecting kind of an urban setting. So I gave this a 3.5 because there were some characters that I really enjoyed following. Like, I was like, I love their part of the story. I love how they fit in. And then there were some characters that I hated following. So anytime that I was reading their storyline, I was just bored. And I was like, I don't really want to follow this person. And another thing too is I just like the turf war. Basically the plot of this is it's like a turf war, like a territory war between gangs. That specific thing I just wasn't super interested in. I wanted a little bit more of like a fantasy-ish plot. So the plot itself wasn't super compelling to me, but I did really enjoy some of the characters. And I want to continue the trilogy to kind of see where it goes a little bit, to see if all of the books are like that, or if it's just this first book kind of like setting everything up, establishing it all. Yeah, so this was a 3.5. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Right Move by Liz Tom 40. I missed the Windy City series. My guilty pleasure is sports romances. I don't know why, but I love them. And I have just really been wanting a taste of Chicago because I want to move there. So I was like, I'm going to pick up the next Windy City book to kind of fulfill that for me. I gave this a 4.25 stars. I thought it was really cute. I thought both characters had really interesting stories, and I loved how they found ways to like heal each other, which I think was just so beautiful. Obviously the spice is kind of why this is a 4.25 stars. This series in general is pretty spicy, but I did enjoy this as a book, as an audiobook, I guess, because that's how I read it. Okay, then I got on a huge thriller kick, so I read The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I gave this a 4.5 stars. It was really suspenseful. It was paced well. I like flew through this. It was super fast-paced and really interesting. I also liked how it was a thriller without being a murder mystery, because, you know, you kind of expect murder when you go into a thriller, and I thought it was interesting how this one didn't really have a murder in it at all, but it was still a thriller. Like, I just found that so interesting because that's not very common. You don't see that often, but I really, really enjoyed this one. Then I picked up Brain Damage by Frida McFadden. On my Kobo. Where is she? Right here. I gave this a 4. I thought this one was thrilling and fast-paced. For me, it was the ending that I didn't love. It seemed just very predictable and anticlimactic. I kind of was like, that's it. Which I find that happens a lot with Frida McFadden books, where I'm just kind of like, that's all. Like, it just... Yeah, so I gave this a 4. It might be closer to a 3.75 or a 3.5. We shall see, but that's kind of what I landed on for this one. Okay, then I read Hot Springs Drive by Lindsay Hunter. I also read this on my Kobo. This I gave a 3.75 stars. This was very like character driven, low plot, which is kind of why it's a 3.75. I just didn't love the lack of plot, but I did think this book was really interesting and the writing was like fascinating. Like I feel like the writing made it so interesting, and just like the style in which the book was formatted just was really, really cool. And I think, you know, watching this woman kind of like descend into madness is really fascinating. Yeah, but I felt like there were some parts where I felt like it was jumping around a little bit too much uh, for my liking. But overall, I did enjoy this. I mean, 3.75 is a pretty good rating. So it's probably closer to a 4. I don't know. If I think about it more, it might end up being a 4. But I did have a really good time with this one. Okay, then I listened to the audiobook of The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This was also a 3.75 stars. So this one I have a lot of mixed thoughts on as well. The first half, I was very much like, okay, when is the plot gonna kind of pick up? I felt like we were just kind of getting backstory on a bunch of characters and kind of jumping around and switching around. But the second half was really kind of where the plot came in, and I was very interested in that plot line and that storyline. Also, the writing, beautiful. Some of the best prose that I've read this year, easily. So it was very hard to rate because I was really bored for the first half of the audiobook, but the second half I was much more locked in and I really enjoyed the writing. So I landed on a 3.75 because I feel like it's not a 4, but it's also not like a 3 or a 3.5. Like it could be a 3.5, but the writing was so good that I didn't want to give it a 3.5. So I feel like 3.75 is kind of like the perfect sweet spot for this one. Then I read a Neck Alley fantasy book called A Wish Made of Poison, I think is what it's called. This was a 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed this a lot. Again, we've kind of got that slow burn romance element. And this one was very hardcore enemies to lovers. There weren't a lot of side characters, but I felt like the side characters that were there were pretty developed and had their own interesting storylines as well. And I think as a standalone book, this does a great job because a lot of times, you know, reading one fantasy book leads into like a duology or a trilogy. This is very clearly a standalone, and I like it as a standalone because it just wraps everything up really nicely. The magic in this is really interesting. Yeah, so a 4.25 is kind of perfect. I love a classic just like quest story, and that's what this was. It was just like a quest with romance and magic and conflict. It was really good. So 4.25 from me. Okay, and then I just have 2 more books that I'm going to be talking about today. One is my current read and the other one I just finished. So the one that I just finished is Extracurricular by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is her newest book. And I really struggled with what to rate this because I absolutely adored Ramona, which is our FMC. I related so much to her and I was laughing out loud at her dialogue. She's funny and relatable and just such a fun character to read about. Nick, I also liked, not as much as Ramona. I also really thought that the third person was really interesting. You don't often see romances written in third person, so I really enjoyed that. And I loved kind of Ramona's, like I said, I really liked Ramona's storyline with kind of like her finding her way as an ex-pop star and just all this stuff. I could not get over the teacher-student relationship. Like, I loved Nick and Ramona together. There were so many cute moments in this, and I was like, I think that they're so cute and sweet. But then I would remember that they're a teacher and a student, and I couldn't get over it. Granted, it's not like she's like 18 and he's 30. Like, she fully is 26 and he's 36. So like there's still an age gap, which is also not my favorite. And I don't know, I couldn't get over it. And they kept saying throughout the book, they were like, I know that this is wrong, like we shouldn't be doing this. And I felt the same way. So I couldn't get over it. Like I thought I would be able to because I really enjoyed their romance so much and their characters as a whole, but I couldn't get past it. So I think I'm gonna give this a 3.5. and it would be like a 4.5 or a 5 if they weren't teacher student. Yeah, I think that's a solid rating for this. Yeah, but again, it was really hard to rate because I had an enjoyable time reading it. I would get so uncomfortable anytime they were like intimate because I was like, they're a teacher and a student. This is weird. Yeah, but still enjoyed it. 3.5, I think, is a good rating for it. And then I'm about halfway through the audiobook, The Locked Ward. Yeah, I'm at the 50% mark. I would say right now, if I were to rate this book right now, not knowing the second half, I would probably give it a 4 stars. I saw a lot of bad reviews for it, which kind of made me a little bit scared going in. A lot of people said it was predictable, but I feel like we're at the halfway point and I still have like too many theories. Like I have like 3 theories kind of going. So I don't have like a clear front runner of who I think did it. I also think the writing is interesting. You know, the fact that one twin's perspective is second person and the other twins is just regular first person. I don't know. I just find that really interesting. And I really want to see how that, you know, comes back in later. So I would say 4 stars, but that might change. So check out my Instagram to see what I ended up rating it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any more bookish videos from me. And check out my social medias in the description box below. I've gotten much better at posting consistently on TikTok and my Bookstagram, so make sure you check those out. And you can follow me on Goodreads or Fable to see what I'm reading in real time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!